Good morning, everybody. Today we are going to study a new selection in literature with the title The First 7 Years. The author of this story is called Bernard Malmont. He lived from 1914 to 1986. He was the son of two Russian immigrants. At that time, of course, that a lot of people immigrated to live in USA as a new land full of good opportunities. Where he writes characters that are realistic, and most of his characters have dreams and have hopes, have ambitions, okay, and they have also universal messages to the world. Of course, he grew up and he learned English, he learned Yiddish, which is his native language. He has the knack for rhythm of spoken dialogue, and so most of his dialogues are very nice to hear and read. He attended the City College of New York and Columbia University. Okay, as you can see in the picture, the story is mainly about a shoemaker. The First 7 Years is a short story that was written in 1950, and it appeared later in one of his short stories collection. Okay, it's called The Magic Barrel in 1958. Okay, in the story, what happened exactly? The narrative tells a story of Phil, a Jewish shoemaker who is searching for a suitable husband for his daughter. The story itself is set in 1948. During that time, the Jewish immigration to the United States was common. It was common that a lot of Jewish people began to immigrate from Europe to settle in USA. And the world was attempt to come to terms with the horrific results of the Holocaust and World War II. Pay attention that it happened after World War II, which means that it's the time after Hitler had done a lot of mass killing to the Jewish people in Europe. And so it's a very critical time or era for the Jewish people. When the narrative begins, Phil is working alongside his assistant. He has an assistant. His name was Sobel. While working, Phil thinks about Max. Who is Max? A young college student, and marvels at the young man's earnest pursuit of education. Yes, this boy or this young man was interested so much in his education, and he did his best to follow that education in the best way. Max then arrives with a pair of shoes needing to be mended. So he came to Phil one day to mend his shoes. Perhaps seeing this as a sign, Phil takes Max aside. He took him aside and began to speak to him. He asked the young man if he would like to meet his daughter, Miriam. Max agrees to meet with Miriam, and Phil gives him her phone number. Later that day, Sobel is working and bounces on his repair equipment so hard he breaks it. Then storms out of the shop after quitting his job. Okay, it seems that something wrong with Sobel. That here Sobel, we found him working so hard and bounding so hard on his equipment that he broke the equipment, and then he storms out of the shop. Okay, and out of the job as well. Maybe he was very sad for the conversation that took place between Phil and Max about Miriam. Sobel's abrupt departure is particularly inconvenient for Phil. Phil, of course, didn't accept his departure. It was Sobel who assisted him 5 years earlier after Phil had a heart attack. And he has been an assistant for 5 years, and he helped him so much, especially when he was sick. He had a heart attack, and he almost had to sell his business. In time, Sobel helped him, who is a Polish Jewish refugee. Okay, learned to run the business and save the field from the ruin. And though Sobel is uneducated, he does spend a lot of time reading. Moreover, he lends books to Miriam. Unlike Max, however, it seems Sobel show no desire to better himself in life. Okay, so Sobel seems to be a good man, okay, interested in life, but he doesn't like education or doesn't like to improve himself in life by education. But he shows interest in Miriam since he is giving her, okay, a lot of time for reading, okay, and he brings her books and things like this. Phil attempts to talk with Sobel and convince him to return to work. Okay, but when he goes to visit him, the landlady says he is not in distraught. Okay, Field eventually hires a new assistant. So Field, of course, lost hope and he began to hire a new assistant. Though the new hire is not as good as worker as Sobel, Field eventually satisfied. Moreover, he is happy that Max and Miriam will have their first date at the end of the week. When the date is over, however, Field learns that Miriam seems underwhelmed by Max, though he feels relieved that she has agreed to a second date. Field again awaits for Miriam after her second date, but learns that Miriam was bored with Max while on the date and that she will not go out with him again. After Miriam's second date with Max, the young man stops calling. He also changes his route to school so that he can bypass Phil's house. Phil finally sees Max again when the young man stops by the shop to pick up his repaired shoes. Though in the same room and with the history of Miriam and Max between them, the embarrassing event is never mentioned. Later that night, Will discovers that the new assistant he hired to replace Sobel is actually stealing from him. He is so shocked by the discovery and he has a heart attack again and is bedridden for 3 weeks. He stayed in bed for 3 weeks. When Phil is finally able to return to work, he realizes that his only hope to seek out Sobel again and convince him to return to work. He finally tracks Sobel down and asks him to return, but Sobel declines. When Phil offers the young man more money, Sobel still declines and admits that he doesn't care about the money. Phil then comments that he has always treated Sobel like a son, so he is unsure as to why Sobel has left and will not return. Sobel then responds by asking why will Phil sought out men for Miriam to date but neglected to seek out Sobel for the owner. Yes, so it appeared now here that Saul, okay, is interested in Miriam and he was very angry. Why is Phil asking other people or other young men to date his daughter Miriam and go out with her without asking Sobel? Okay, why didn't he give him that honor? As the two men talk about Miriam and work, it's revealed that the only reason Sobel has actually worked for Phil for the last 5 years is because he is in love with Miriam. Yes, it seems that that is the only thing that made him stay as an assistant for Phil, that he is in love with his daughter. Though Phil partially guessed this some time ago, he never allowed himself to entertain the thought. Sobel finally admits that Miriam knows how he feels about her, but Phil tells Sobel that he will never be able to marry Miriam. After Sobel begins crying, Phil feels sorry for him and has a change of heart. Though he doesn't want Miriam to be a shoemaker's daughter, he eventually agrees to a future union between the two. Yes, of course, as a father, he wants his daughter to have a better husband, not a shoemaker like him. He tells Sobel that if he waits 2 more years, he can talk to Miriam about marriage. When Field arrives at work the very next morning, Sobel is back and is hard at work. Okay. As with many of Melmoth's other stories, the theme of the Jewish the theme of the Jewish immigration and Jewish identity can be found throughout the narrative. Yes, of course, we can see that it's very clear from the story that here the writer concentrates on the Jewish immigration and Jewish identity as a group of people. As a Polish Jewish refugee, Sobel's arrival in the United States also highlights not only the theme of Jewish immigration but the devastating effects of the Holocaust. And Polish Jewish like Sobel found themselves displaced even in their new lives, such as Sobel's in America, while he, like many others, is seeking out the American dream. This search for identity and success of belonging is laced with the devastating reality of what took place in Europe years earlier and what is now unfolding all around them. The narrative also takes into account the religious aspects of its character. Field himself is faced with quite a moral choice in determining what to do about Sobel's love for Miriam. Miriam, for her part, sees distinctly spiritual traits in Sobel. The narrative itself is informed by a particular story from the Bible. It's the story of how Jacob labored as Laban instructed, all to marry his daughter Rachel. Jacob had to toil for 7 years just to win her hand in marriage. As such, Melmoth's story highlights the perseverance not only of the Jewish as people, but of individuals in the face of overwhelming obstacles. In time, endurance and hope create inroads that lead these characters to love, friendship, and acceptance. Okay, if you want to watch this story, okay, I have put the link for you here. Okay, you can watch it, and then you go to answer the question that I will send to you. Thank you for listening.